Make sure, yep, we're live on Facebook. Alrighty, well, hello and welcome everyone to our webinar series presented by Florida Women's Law Group. I'm Jadlyn Fleischer, legal intern here at Florida Women's Law Group. This webinar series is designed to be a resource for all women with any type of family law issue. Today, we'll be discussing how small business loans could affect your divorce. Before we dive in, I would like to give you some information about our host and guest expert. Our host is Heather Quick, founder and CEO of Florida Women's Law Group, which is a family law firm that advocates for women in North Florida. The firm educates and empowers women on rights and the law so they can find the strength to endure the process and end up better not only financially, but emotionally as well. Heather Quick has been a licensed Florida attorney for the past 20 years, with the majority of her practice being in family law. Our guest expert today is Josh Shilts, the president at Shilts CPA. He is focused on assisting attorneys, individuals, and businesses with complex financial matters and disputes. He has held roles with international consulting and public accounting firms in Miami and New York City, as well as positions with large public organizations. Josh is a frequent lecturer on a variety of forensic accounting matters. He has been involved with hundreds of forensic investigations dealing with a variety of matters involving personal and business disputes, as well as the identification and mitigation of fraudulent activities. Please join me in welcoming Heather Quick and Josh Shilts to the second part of our webinar series.
Well, thank you everyone who has tuned in today. Of course, thank you as always, Josh, to join us today and talk about really what we're talking about today, businesses that have, that are owned closely held businesses, small businesses primarily, but could affect a larger business, but one that, really is part of the marriage, maybe one it supplies all the, income, but also has assets, and how that comes into play, one in a divorce, which it always does. And Josh is the expert that most family law attorneys really throughout the state definitely use to give us a value, because if it's marital, we've got to split it. Well, now we have a situation with a lot of businesses, one going out of business, some on hold, some were maybe more financially stable, and maybe some are thriving, frankly. So what we also have is the stimulus package that, part one, part two, that have been passed. And so what we're going to talk about today, and I think I'm going to ask Josh first to just explain a little bit to you, if you're not, just so that you have an understanding of what these loans can do for a small business, because the second part has passed. They are approving and funding. It's not super fast, but the idea being, keeping businesses alive, because it's hopefully, if it's done correctly by the business owner, that loan turns into a gift, added income, and doesn't have to be repaid, and keeps the business afloat. So, Josh, will you just kind of start overall with, what is available for small businesses that may keep them alive, thriving, getting some extra funds that, we should think about in the face of a divorce and a business is involved?
Yeah, thanks again for having me, Heather. Really happy to talk to you and the viewers about this topic, because it's a complex topic on top of already a complex subject. I'm lucky enough that I sit on the AICPA's Business Valuation Committee, and we actually have a task force that I'm chairing that talks about the CARES Act and how the CARES Act is going to impact valuation. And that's allowed me to speak with other experts and colleagues, not just here in Florida, but New Jersey, Philadelphia, Canada, across the country. And where we're at is a lot of confusion, right? Because valuation in its simplest form is the value of something into the future. And with so much uncertainty in the economy, industry, and really specific geographic regions across this country right now, a lot of valuation professionals are struggling with this topic and asking for guidance. But at the simplest point, let's talk about this. The government came out with the CARES Act, and there were several provisions within the CARES Act. One of the most enticing, beneficial provisions was the payroll protection program. And this is a loan in its simplest form. I'm going to call it a loan as debt, but then I'm going to explain the accounting aspects of that. That is based upon your average monthly payroll cost, and you multiply that by 2.5%. If you receive the money as a business owner, and there's a lot of talk about are all businesses going to get this? I eventually think they will, just because it would be completely unfair to leave certain businesses out.
Right.
But what it does is it gives initial liquidity into a business. And the purpose of the loan is during an 8-week period, if the funds are used for 75% payroll, at least 75% payroll, rent and utilities, the business owner can submit that documentation and that loan is forgiven. So on a balance sheet, all right, you're going to have cash coming into the business with a debt, right? But if that debt's removed and they are approved for forgiveness, it immediately becomes equity. So certain businesses are going to increase in value. Talking to a colleague of mine in the metropolitan New York area, they're really struggling right now, right?
Yeah.
And he's a member of a very well-known accounting firm there, and they're struggling. They have a lot of auto dealership clients. You look at Northeast Florida, obviously restaurants, movie theaters, businesses that are based upon capacity have been decimated by this whole
and like personal gyms, fitness centers, and they still can't open, and nail salons, hair salons. I mean, that's a lot of downtime, and those are based, again, just like you said, on capacity, but a lot of volume, a lot in and out.
And there have been businesses where they've received the money, and when you receive the money, you have an 8-week period to use it. But part of the CARES Act, and I've been consulting with some business owners that are in the restaurant industry, is they can't get their employees back to work because the unemployment actually pays more. So the AICPA is urging the Treasury to change the cover period to when the stay-at-home orders are lifted. Okay?
That would be helpful. So let's talk about that, because that's just really interesting, one, to me. And then if you have, and let's say you guys own a restaurant, and so maybe you got the money. However, you have no payroll because, one, they can't come back to work, or now it's limited, because I think right now in the Jacksonville area, or maybe it was the governor said, outdoor, right? Not bars, but like outdoor eating. Not everybody has that capacity to do that. And they may not be able to bring all their employees back right away. Because then also, even if the business says, all right, I got the money, now I can pay you. One, are there going to be enough people coming in to eat, to use all of your employees? Because not everybody's going to rush back out. I think it'll take a little time. But then also, with our employees coming back that were laid off or getting unemployment, their children aren't going back to school. So for those who would have been in a daytime, between, individuals, if your child is of school age, between before care, school, after care, you can work 40 hours and your child is taken care of. And now that's going to be, I think, an additional thing. So that's really interesting. I didn't think about that with the businesses, that what if they can't get their employees back?
Yeah. So, the one thing about the CARES Act and the PPP loans is it's evolving. They got the money out quick, and hindsight's always 20/20, and they're thinking about some things. One of the things that just came out this week, the Treasury Secretary and then Marco Rubio said that for any businesses that received more than $2 million in funding, the SBA will automatically audit them to make sure that the funds were used for what they should have. And there's some really open language that talks about facing economic uncertainty. In my professional opinion, even today, I still think most businesses are facing economic uncertainty because the fact of the matter is unemployment rises. And when unemployment rises, it can have a domino effect in many different things. So there's a few things then on the PPP loan and divorce that are interesting. Let's start.
Yeah, let's get back. Sorry, I get so sidetracked because I do find it.
I mean, it's a topic that goes into a lot of wormholes. Believe me,
it does, and affects so many people. Like it's just affecting so many individuals,
and in so many different ways. And to keep it in the divorce realm, I'm going to come up with. Here's just a few things. You're in a temporary support agreement, and let's say the husband is a business owner. Well, he can't, supposedly now he doesn't have any business. So the PPP loan is going to pay up to everyone on the payroll up to $100,000 plus their benefits and everything. So they can meet their temporary support. If their income had been based upon a higher amount, there may need to be an adjustment. There may not need to be an adjustment because they could be one of those businesses that, yes, they've had economic uncertainty. Maybe it's impacted them by 20 to 25% of revenues. However, they're still keeping their doors open. So they're able to still pay at those levels. So that's one thing to consider, right?
Right. Well, and also because, like, obviously it's good to talk with your spouse. And if we're in a temporary situation and you are getting an order of support, or even if it's an, alimony, whatever, post-divorce, yes, you can have that conversation with them, but I want you to be savvy about it. If they're just, their business has been hurt, but they may fail to tell you, oh, but I just got a couple $100,000 so that I could continue payroll. And, let's think about it. Business went down. If it didn't shut down and it's a decrease, okay, that money that they would have used for payroll, they're going to need it. I'm not saying that they're not, but the wise thing, and that's the wise thing to do. Use the money you get for your payroll and know that the money that you're still making it, maybe it would have been a struggle. Well, save that for after these 8 weeks are over because, we still may feel the effects, but it may not be an automatic, hey, I can't pay you support, because you need to ask about that.
Correct.
For sure.
Some of the other things when we're looking at it now on the valuation side, let's say you have a mediation or something coming up in the next few months, and the business is a part of that. So how do you value a business right now that's in the midst of a pandemic, and you have a valuation date that's in this area, right? And I'll just be very honest with everyone. A lot of valuation folks are avoiding issuing reports because it's difficult. Do you adjust cash flows? Do you increase risk? How do you account for this PPP loan money on the balance sheet? Is it a debt? If you actually follow the rules, it may not be a debt, so that can affect net asset value, and there could be more assets into the business. But the one thing, and I just jotted down, what I'm looking at is there's really three main things.
Okay.
I'm looking at the effect of the debt on cash flow, right? Because we're always measuring cash flow during that period. I think that it's important to see how this debt may or may not impact it negatively or positively. The second thing I'm looking at is the strength of the balance sheet for that business. Is this a business that was properly capitalized, undercapitalized? Those are some components. Most importantly, that what I'm looking at now, though, is where is this business located? What has been the impact from government regulations, as well as just in consumer activity in that specific area? Listen, valuing a business right now in Miami is very different than valuing a business in Ponte Vedra. Okay, it just is. I mean, for those of us in the Jacksonville area, we live in an area that is much more spread out.
Not as dense. Mm-hmm.
Yes, not as condensed. So with technology, we're looking at it. And
Yeah.
then the final thing is, and it's the most important, what industry are you in? Okay? Because specific industries have been decimated. Restaurants, movie theaters, cruise ships, but other industries are booming right now. Grocery stores, online food retailers. If you have a business that does meal delivery, for example, that's a very good business. So when we start talking about evaluation, one of the things that doesn't really get brought up a lot when we're in these areas, because it's more of the scientific side of it, is it's something called the premise of value. When we're valuing businesses, there's really two main premises of value. We can either value it as if the business is going to continue to operate. We call that a going concern. The other valuation method is called a liquidated value, which is basically saying that, look, the business is not going to be able to move forward, right? So we're going to have a liquidated value. And there's two types of liquidated values. There's a forced liquidation, where you may have creditors that are saying, look, you got to fire sale that. And as you know, if I fire sale something, it's going to go at a cheaper rate than what is the second type, is an orderly liquidation, where we're going to put our asset, whatever that may be. Maybe it's a huge cooking range in a restaurant, right? And instead of just trying to fire sale that, we're going to have an orderly liquidation, right? Because that may impact the value. Obviously, there's going to be a higher value to it. So the premise of value is a question that I'm starting to ask people in specific industries on, hey, attorney-client, are we valuing this as a going concern, or are we doing it as a liquidated value? Now,
let me ask,
that's an important concept, right? Because if we go to the liquidated value, it's just a net asset value, basically, Heather. And as you know, then we're not double dipping and getting into that personal goodwill component. So now, instead of having to deal with the whole, how much of the income is attributable to the value of the business versus the business owner spouse, we can say, look, we're just going to value the hard assets. And now you get into a situation where the business owner spouse may not have the ability to run that business, but a vocational expert may be needed to determine what their income capabilities are, having to move into a different line of work or not being able to own their own business. You know, there's a lot of people that recently just, look, the economy was doing very, very well over the last few years. And we saw a huge growth in a lot of people becoming more entrepreneurial and starting their own businesses. I feel for the individual that said January 2020 is the year that I'm going to go out on my own. But to then think that there's not going to be any income that that person can reproduce is a false assumption to make, because they were employable before. So this PPP loan has tentacles that can stretch into so many different situations. I think what's important is to understand that depending on your divorce or depending on whatever situation you may be in, like a support situation, the number one thing to know is, did the business owner spouse receive a PPP loan, and what were the effects on that business? Those are the first two questions. Right? Because if you're just assuming that everything's bad because of what you're watching on the news channel, that's not entirely true. And I want people to realize too that what we do believe that's going to be happening in the coming months is there's going to be more merger and acquisition activity, because there's going to be a supply of businesses for sale because maybe they were undercapitalized. So it's a changing moment. But if I'm the non-business owner spouse, and for whatever situation, I'm about to go to mediation and I need a valuation, or you're concerned about the income or the ability to pay alimony or child support, did you get a PPP loan? I think it's important to ask in discovery for the PPP loan calculation and how they calculated their costs, right? And understanding what was the income. Here's another great story. You know, and Heather and I have talked about this. The business owner can manipulate, while legal, their income for many purposes,
Right.
tax
Yeah,
purposes and divorce purposes. Well,
exactly.
it'd be great now to see what was on their PPP loan application and see what they were marking down as their own payroll. So there's another piece of evidence that is helpful for discovery. You're also going to want to see then how that money was spent, right? There's
Yeah.
Here's something that no one's talking about. The PPP loan, you get it for 2 years. You know what the interest rate is on a PPP loan?
What, like 2 or 3%?
1%.
It's
So
almost like
if
free
you have
money.
a business, yeah. What if you have a business that doesn't use, they get 100, let's say they get $100,000. They use
Okay.
50,000 of it. What are they going to do with that other 50,000? Are they going to return it, or are they going to swap that debt out for high interest debt?
Higher interest rate, which would be very wise. Exactly. Because then even, yeah, you're right. Because they can't even use it for the other thing. And so
And
I
how does
think
that
that's,
impact the value? How does that impact their cash flows? Because if they had a high interest debt that was 8% and now they've swapped that out for a 1%, the interest expense is less, right?
right.
So cash flows theoretically couldn't. There's a lot of businesses have an Amex card and they hold a credit card balance, and depending on what that is, that can be anywhere from 6, 10, 18% in
Mhm.
interest. And now you say, you know what? Instead of having that $30,000 balance, I'm going to wipe this out and I'm going to put that on. It's still debt on the books, but it's actually a positive cash flow. So as a forensic, these are the questions that I have when my clients are coming to me, and we're in this period of economic uncertainty with this pandemic. Is you really need to understand that business now more than ever, and more importantly, you need to understand how are they using the cash and the assets available to them, and is it being done smart, or are they being fraudulent? Is this individual who's the business owner's spouse so what's the word I want to use? So much of a recluse that they could potentially have themselves being audited by the SBA. What does that do to the value of the business? And Heather, as you know, and your whole staff knows, is the business is one of many assets. And you guys have hired me from time to time to say, Josh, how do we maybe offset the value of this asset because we're looking at the marital home, or we're looking at a retirement account, right? And
Right.
so understanding the business is extremely important, specifically when you get into mediation and settlement agreements, in my opinion.
Now, let me ask you this, just from a standpoint of overall timing, because like this happens a lot, like absent, the pandemic, and that is that. Excuse me, sorry. Not always empty rooms for everywhere. So, when we're in a normal situation, divorce, the date that we're valuing is always important. And now, let's just say you had a booming restaurant, and that, we can't value it, like, and you filed in December, and normally we would go back, but that would be a complete fiction that we cannot do. And we just can't do it. And then let's say now you are in, no, please stop. Please stop. You can do that in a few. Let's say that, we talked about some of the industries that were booming. So let's talk, I guess, a good example is a grocery store, maybe wherever it may be. Maybe it's a specialty grocery organic store that is now, really killing it. Okay, they're going to say, well, I want to value when you filed in December, but it's like, well, that's also a fiction, because it doesn't work both ways. Like, and it's unfortunate, but I don't see a judge, and it doesn't matter if they say, hey, the value of the restaurant in December, was $3 million. It just doesn't matter because the money's just not there.
Yeah.
Now,
So,
if you can't, so what are the standards? What's coming out from
sure.
your organizations
So,
on that?
in a divorce, it's not uncommon that you have a filing date in December of 2018, but by the time we get to the court, because mediation failed or for whatever reason, 12, 18 months after the fact, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So what do we look at? It's just like looking at an investment account that if it had 100,000, but the market did well, we call that passive appreciation. You see that not only in your investment and retirement accounts,
Right.
the house, right? Like the housing market. Same thing with the business, right? So if you owned a restaurant in December of 2018, and because of what's going on, that's passive. That's not because the owner tried to devalue the company. It wasn't an active participational moment on their side. So you need to revalue it. Do what I commonly refer to as the true up value. Where's the value at now? And you have to understand how the pandemic has potentially a negative or a positive impact on that business. And there's a lot of things that I think is going to be talking about. Everyone wants to talk about the restaurant business and how it's been impacted right now. But we get a lot of valuations done of doctors' offices. They may be elective surgeons that if you were looking at their balance sheet right now, it wasn't as good, but we all know that they've just been basically putting their clientele on hold for a little bit, and you're expecting an uptick. What if you have a hair salon that has been down, but now you get into a situation where, I mean, I have a wife and 3 daughters. They're ready to go to the hair salon, right? And there's back orders. But then let's say that hair salon has to abide by some guidelines that reduces the capacity by half. So these passive activities, these market fluctuations need to be understood for your divorce to understand how that impacts the marital estate. And that's a really good question because it's, it may not be advantageous to go to mediation right now. You may have to wait this out to see what the effects are. In 2 months from now, listen, if you and I were having this conversation 2 months ago or 2.5 months ago, it's a very different conversation.
Oh, completely different. Yeah.
What's to say this morning I got up, I had my cup of coffee, and I'm hearing about this new drug from Gilead that has a 30% reduction in as far as the effects of the COVID. That's in 2 months that they've done this. Our scientists, our medical community, it's not. So my point is, it's not it wouldn't be unfathomable to think that in a month from now, this whole thing could be over. Maybe they have the miracle drug that's out there and boom, we're back up and running. So there's obviously a lot of uncertainty. That uncertainty needs to be understood in the valuation. But more importantly, when it comes to your divorce, you need to understand how this uncertainty impacts the value of your marital estate and the impact it has on potential support calculations, so you can make the right decision. I mean, that's what this is all about, is being strategic, making the right situations.
Right.
If you're going through a divorce, you're probably like, man, I want to get through this, but you may have to just be a little bit more patient. And 2 months of patience when you're talking about the next 10, 20, 30 years of your life is
right.
That's the smart thing to do.
Well, or talking about the past 20 years of your life. And then it's like, and that's not always because usually if one person wants to slow it down and wait, the other person finds it to their advantage to continue. So those are just conversations that you have, with your lawyer, and we determine, but we also, in that kind of case, we really need to talk with someone like Josh who can at least lay it out a little bit and help us determine if it is wise to ask the court to continue, give a little more time for a little bit of stabilization of the economy, because things are just like, I'm hopeful that are peaking in that way, in a negative way now, but that, we're going to rebound. We just don't know when and how much. And if if we're talking about assets that have been specifically affected and we're trying to resolve that, we can get creative, but definitely, talk to your attorney, think about that, because there's so many things that have affected that are beyond, your husband's control, your control within the business. And we want to, one, make sure we're aware of everything. And then two, make the best decisions we can, and, or, get creative in a mediation as far as if things do rebound, how can we make some parts of an agreement? You can only do that in mediation. A trial is really not going to allow you to do that. And that's where, we'd reach out to Josh and say, okay, these are the things we have. How do we protect these people in the event it, just boom, goes back up, financially in the next 3 to 4 months, 6 months even, but you made a deal, on alimony and division, and one spouse gets the business, or, so there's a lot of things we can do that we can allow for some fluctuation potentially in the future. And that would be
my whole take on this is, and I say this all the time, I don't try and portray myself as the smartest, but what I try and tell my clients, and I know you feel the same way over there with your team, is we want to be the most prepared, right? And we want to understand the good and the bad so we can make educated decisions.
Exactly.
And that's what I would say to who's ever watching us right now is, there's probably not an immediate answer. However, sitting down, having that conversation, understanding the good impact, the bad impact, what this means, listen, I think our economy, when I look at the economy, I don't just look at the Dow Jones, right? I have to look at unemployment. The other thing that I am looking at is we've dumped $5 trillion in debt into the federal level, right? How's that debt going to be paid? There's a lot of people already talking about that, depending upon the election this year, there may be a change to the tax rates. So one of the things when we had our current administration came in, they lowered tax rates for a lot of people. They put some different programs in. Some of those are set to sunset. But with any new administration, one of the first things they do is they mess with the tax code.
Yeah.
If we were to get a new administration in here, I don't think it's far-fetched to think that there's going to be changes to the tax rates. And
definitely.
The tax rates not only affect your cash flow, but those tax rates have an impact, as we saw when in 17, that those tax rates impact the value of assets.
Correct. Right. Yeah. So there's a lot that we don't know, but we do know how, at least we know the questions to ask, and we know where to look. And we may not have all the answers, but the more information you have, the better decisions you can make. So if you are thinking about divorce, in a divorce, and there is a small business involved, that is, provides, that your husband, yourself as the owner of a family business, you guys have a share of, you need to know these things, and you need to be asking these questions. You need to have these conversations with your attorney and make sure that you have, somebody there valuing the business, forensic accounting, and really helping you understand. Because the worst, one of the things I really hate to see for any individual is to come to me after the fact, and you just can't change these things if the divorce is final. And even if you mediated, agreed, you're usually gonna, when that paper's signed, you've waived a lot of your rights to look at financials, and you've asserted everything, and it's all been provided to you. So if you're in that situation, please reach out and let us at least ask some questions and help you determine if you're, if it's the right time, if you're making the right decisions. And if you, most importantly, do you really even have all the information you need? Because everything's coming out so quickly, and it's really getting up to date information. And now the second round of funding is really just starting. So you really don't even know the extent at this point. So
we're talking about a third and a fourth round,
yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
this is going to be the topic for at least the rest of this year.
Indeed it will.
And so, yeah, you want to stay educated, and you want to work with the right professionals, and the professionals that understand their strengths and their capabilities. And I love what you said, Heather, is having a really good toolbox, right?
Yeah,
Having that toolbox. The good professionals that I've met and worked with that's a great question. I don't know it right now, but I can find out the answer for
mm-hmm.
you. Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah. So thank you so much, Josh, once again. I hope this was helpful to you, all our viewers. Josh and I sometimes get carried away because we're really interested in it. We're both passionate about how all of this stuff affects our clients, our potential clients, and anyone out there, because neither one of us want to see someone making decisions without all the information and without having the right guidance. So I apologize if we got a little carried away, but we're here to help you. Please reach out. The links to both of our offices and our numbers and information will be on this video. Share this video with anyone, please, if it's something that you know of somebody who should hear this information, because that's the idea right now. Get as much information as possible, and that's why we're doing this. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And if we can help you, please let us know.
Yeah, so thank you everyone who's able to listen in for the second portion of this webinar series. As always, if there is a topic you would like addressed or a question you would like answered, please call, email, or send us a Facebook message, and it could definitely be addressed in one of our upcoming videos. We hope you found the information today very helpful, and like I said, if you think of any additional questions, please call our office or send us a message. We are available by phone at 904-241-0012. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time.